Welcome, everyone. As you just heard, today we're going to be talking about three main ways that you can really improve your end user or your clinician experience across all of your health IT systems, which often include Citrix, VMware Horizon, and your EHR applications. I'm excited by ways of introductions to introduce you to Avi Lipp, who's one of our technical consultants here at Goliath. And my name's Stacey Leidwinger, and I'll be driving the presentation as we begin. While we wait for a few more people to join in, let me go through some basic housekeeping. So in terms of agenda today, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about what our health IT clients tell us in terms of the challenges they're really experiencing, especially as we move into 2021 and still have a lot of our employees working from home. After that, we are going to go into those three core ways that you can improve your end user experience. And with that, Avi's going to demonstrate the technology that many of our health IT clients use today. Upon completion, we'll answer any questions you have. Do submit any in the Q&A box. If we see some pop up that are relevant, we will absolutely answer throughout, but we'll leave time at the end for those questions. One we always get is, will this recording be available? Yes, upon completion of this webinar today, within the next 24 hours, you'll have a recording of this webinar that you can refer back to or pass along to your colleagues. So with that, we're going to jump right in. Now, I'm sure many of you, especially in health IT, feel this pain. One of the things that we often hear from our clients, especially in health IT, is you have 50% of the resources, the people, the finances to really go ahead and support the same amount of users as your enterprise counterparts. Not only do you have less resources to support those users, you often are dealing with a highly critical situation around patient care, where people absolutely need access to the information they need to do their job in a timely manner. They can't be fighting with technology or struggling with long logon times. Additionally, then, from a health IT perspective, you have a lot of vendor complexity, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, where you have multiple different applications, often reliant around that core IT infrastructure for delivery. Often in health IT, you've been working with remote workers for years now. Remote sometimes is in the same hospital as they move from station to station, but really that concept of enabling everyone to work from any location and any device has been at the heart, and there's a lot of complex technology that makes that happen. And that really requires you then to have end-to-end visibility. And we're going to show you this today, but this is absolutely the foundation of Goliath. We are the only vendor in our space that offers monitoring and troubleshooting software for the end user experience focused on health IT with purpose-built modules for Cerner, MEDITECH, Epic, and Allscripts. It is because of a lot of the intelligence that you're going to see today that when clients purchase Goliath, they say it's as if they've added 2 to 3 full-time troubleshooting experts. And maybe most importantly, have seen noticeable results around improving patient care and removing those technical barriers that clinicians and medical staff are often fighting with, and probably what you're hearing often with your own users. So if we move on, what are some of those challenges? And I was actually just talking to a client yesterday, and I thought he summed it up really well. And he said that if I don't have data, Stacey, I have a perception problem. A perception where my users feel that the experience is always slow. And they're telling me, you know what, it's the application. It's my EHR application's fault. It's my endpoint or my computer that's the issue. It's the corporate network or the health network that I'm on. There's always an issue, and everyone is making a hypothesis about what that root cause is. So if you don't have data to identify true root cause quickly, a lot of these are the things that you're facing. There's lots of finger pointing. There's lack of evidence, poor communication between your own team, management, users, vendors. And those gaps really lead to great frustration. And specifically in health IT, there's gaps exist because of the critical nature, not only of the business, but how your IT elements and that underlying infrastructure interact with your EHR and other medical applications. And so here's the next kind of walk through a simulation on why these challenges really exist and hit home around the complexity is that in order to deliver that clinician experience, you need roughly 15 different vendors and solutions to all come together at a single time. So let's start with your users. Your users are all unique. They're all working in different locations, sometimes in the same health IT hospital or area. Sometimes now they're working from home. Sometimes they have their other medical offices that they're working from. They all have a unique device, and these devices are constantly changing, especially now that telehealth is becoming more prominent. Each of them, if you're in a Citrix environment, are kicking off an ICA session. Again, very individualistic. And then how they're logging in becomes an individualistic element. Are they using the health system's network? Are they logging in from their home Wi-Fi? Are they using a hotspot? So before you even get to the technology, you have a very unique environment based on that user, their behavior, their endpoint, their connection. Then you move into the back end of the technology. If you're using Citrix, you've got your role servers, your storefront, your delivery services. You have all your desktop applications, your EHR applications, other cloud-based applications. You have your back-end systems with licensing and profile, Active Directory. And below that, you have your hypervisor host layer. Even greater complexity is some of these elements might be on-prem and some might be being hosted in a private or public cloud. And so when a user calls in and says, my system is slow today, you don't know if it's the application, the infrastructure, their internet, their behavior, or maybe it was a bad GPO in their profile setting in Active Directory. Without visibility, it becomes extremely challenging to respond to your users. And as they become frustrated, so are you. Now, I mentioned complexity, and this is one of those things that we see in health IT a lot, especially if you have hosted applications or EHR solutions. So this is an example. I was talking about that perception versus reality. We know that any of you maybe are using Cerner Millennium, you might be using the hosted within their RHO environment. And so when there is an issue, often what end users or clinicians complain is Cerner is slow. And because it's hosted, you have even less visibility. But the reality of what's going on is there's a lot of complexity behind this to get to your EHR application. You still have your overall data center. And within your data center, you have all those elements I just showed you previously where you're connecting in with your ICA session. You have your entire Citrix infrastructure, your virtual machines. Maybe you're using Horizon or VMware. All of that's in there. Then you've got your cloud applications. You have your other desktop applications. And so what really happens, obviously when I click one more time, is the reality is it's not a straight line between your clinicians and your EHR application. Instead, there are those 20 different vendors and many failure points. So just another way of kind of visualizing what I just spoke about and why it's so complex for health IT. And so what we find with our clients and what they turn to Goliath then for is end-to-end visibility and having purpose-built modules that will allow you to monitor, troubleshoot, alert, document across all of those elements, from end user experience, looking at connection speed and endpoint and user behavior, from the core delivery infrastructure, whether it be Citrix, VMware, maybe you're using IDEL as your thin client, all your Microsoft applications, maybe you're in the cloud. And then you have your EHR applications, which I mentioned, and we will showcase today those purpose-built modules that will bring into that performance data. It's truly when you have that end-to-end visibility that you can isolate and prove root cause in minutes. The other aspect of this is being able to proactively alert you. So you're not just reacting when end users complain about an issue, but instead can proactively identify with alerts when an issue exists and address that issue either automatically through automatic remediation actions or by going ahead and knowing that you need to take action before your clinicians are even impacted. Obviously, go to the next slide. And that really sums up, and I know we had a few people register that wasn't just healthcare, so I did want to make a point that every one of these clients are using our solution in just how I spoke about, to have that end-to-end visibility, that proactive ability to alert when issues exist. And so what they'll tell you is because of the embedded intelligence and automation that automatically identifies their entire IT infrastructure, it then identifies what to alert, how to alert on it, and then alerts based on industry best practices. They say because of that, operationally, Goliath has the impact of hiring 2 to 3 troubleshooting experts. And I can promise you that every single logo you see on the screen would come back with that very statement. So now let's go ahead and talk about what are those three ways, right? How can you materialize everything I just said? We're really going to focus on those three aspects, which is how do you anticipate an issue so you can address it before your clinicians are impacted? How do you isolate and prove root cause through troubleshooting? And then maybe most importantly is how do you document it? How do you get the data so that you can share it with your counterparts, with management, with end users? How do you integrate it maybe within third-party tools like a ServiceNow or a Splunk? And how do you enhance it with out-of-box reports? As I mentioned, when organizations that we've worked with have taken action across all three of these elements, not only have they transformed their IT department from reactive to proactive, but they have drastically improved the quality of patient care because clinicians are spending more time with each patient and less time looking at the screen saying, I'm sorry, my system's slow today. I'm sorry, I can't get to that application. Give me another minute. Every single one of us as a patient has been in that situation. And so we want to do everything we can to empower those clinicians with a strong acting architecture underneath. So with that, I'm going to drill into the first one as it comes to anticipate. And so when you're thinking about three ways, what does it really mean to anticipate? It's really about using embedded automation and intelligence so that you can go ahead and alert your team across IT when an issue takes place so that you can act upon it before it's impacting any of your clinicians, right? And it's understanding each and every one of those potential conditions, events, and failure points that could impact all the way from, is it a problem within my overall network? Is it a problem that might be going on within a VM? Is it a problem that's going on with the Citrix infrastructure? All of those elements need to be continually tested and alerted if a problem occurs. The other big key around this is you can't just test from one location. Many of you have multiple locations. You have remote users. So you need to be able to anticipate issues from a user's perspective. And I know many organizations have traditional networking monitoring. They have lots of monitoring going on, but the challenge is it's not from the user's perspective going through the complexity I just showed you. And Avi's going to demonstrate how we do that. And then a big key of the anticipate is being able to report back on it. Are you being successful? Are you avoiding more tickets? We just had a health client or a children's hospital, and they told us after working with Goliath, they were able to reduce their ticket count by 70% because people were now not having the negative impact. Not only did they fix some of the nagging issues, but they were being alerted when some of the issues were arising and addressing them before tickets were ever filed. Let me go ahead and give you an example of what I mean. And this is kind of the flow we're going to go through is give you an example, and then Avi will demonstrate the technology. We've worked with Universal Health Services, and you can go on our website and actually see videos from them. They came to us for several different reasons. One, they had a large outage in their Nevada hospitals where Cerner was actually down, and you can imagine caused quite a level of frustration. They also were having challenges where their power chart and Dragon dictation applications were constantly crashing, and it was becoming challenging to really isolate root cause. And finally, their patient portal at times was going down or was performing slowly, and they had no way to be proactively notified of that issue, which meant they were always reliant on an end user telling them that the issue existed, which took them even longer to resolve the issue. So what they did, and we're going to show you this in a few minutes, is they deployed Goliath application availability monitoring across not only all of their on-premise applications, but also in RHO. And Avi will talk about this in 1 minute, because we are the only one that has our agents sitting in Cerner RHO if you're a Cerner hospital, and can allow you and alert you if there's any issue that is going on that could negatively impact your users. By deploying this, we were able to proactively alert them anytime there was an issue. We also found out that one of the reasons that they were having issues was because they had some problems on premises with their router system, for example. And so it had nothing to do with Cerner RHO. In fact, they found many problems of the time. It had nothing to do with Cerner. It was some kind of issue with user behavior or the overall infrastructure. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Avi. Do you want to talk a little bit about how our application availability monitor is deployed, and then go ahead and demonstrate for our audience today?
Absolutely, Stacy. So as everyone can see up on the screen right now, at the top left, you can see Cerner RHO, which is the remote hosted facility where, as Stacy mentioned, we're able to deploy our technology onto the Citrix delivery infrastructure so that you can then get a full end-to-end view from RHO, then all the way to the on-premise infrastructure where the end users are located at as well. So you get from Cerner RHO all the way to the end user's location. Now, as far as one of the proactive features of the technology, the application availability monitor. What happens is that is deployed onto a small agent that's deployed onto a laptop, a VMware workstation, oftentimes at each of the different hospital locations. So for Universal Health Services, as an example, they have it deployed to over 40 different hospital sites, where what this technology is doing is launching real Citrix sessions, testing the entire delivery infrastructure, testing the network, the back-end systems, making sure that they're all working together and functioning properly to deliver those resources to the clinicians and the end users. Now, to give a little bit of context of what is actually happening, I have a quick video of the technology logging into Cerner. So what you can see here is the technology to launch a web browser to the NetScaler storefront sign-in page. It'll log in with credentials, just like an end user would, confirm authentication. It'll then navigate on the storefront page, looking for specified applications or desktops. Here, FirstNet, clicking on it, confirm a successful launch of the application. Once it does that, closes it out and moves on to the next one. And the technology can be configured to do this 24/7. Some enterprise organizations will have this just run at, say, 6 a.m. To confirm that the resources are available before the end users get them for the day. But in healthcare, where it's mission critical applications that you need to be having up and running all day, most hospitals that we work with will have it be running all day. Now, where do you go if you get an alert about a failure, a failed launch, a slow logon time? This is where you go, the application availability analysis tab. And this is a central monitoring configuration console for all those launches that are taking place across the environment. You can, it's broken down to two different sections really. The top section is a high-level dashboard that shows you the average launch times represented by these blue bars. And then you have the overall availability at any point in time represented here by this yellow trend line. You can filter this based off of date and time. You can see the specific locations where these launches are taking place from. So as I mentioned, a lot of hospitals will have this deployed to 40 different hospital sites, all which would be listed right here. The specific resource, so whether you're launching, Epic, whether you're launching a Cerner application, have those resources that you're testing located right there. And then at the bottom, you have the additional details, such as the date and time, the resources that we just discussed, but more importantly, whether the launch was successful or if it failed. And the whole point of this is to be proactive and alert you about any performance issues prior to end users being impacted by it. Now, say you get an alert, there's a failed launch, maybe there's a maintenance window overnight, some updates were done to that to a specific application that led to it to not be published. So when this technology does its job, it fails at the enumeration stage because there wasn't that application to be selected. You get that notification. You can come here to get further details. You can get details of each step of the process, including screenshot evidence of exactly what would have presented itself to the end user. So it takes away that whole process of having to ask an end user to replicate an issue because you have all that information right here. Now, this is just one proactive piece of the technology. A lot of the technology is driven by hundreds of monitoring rules that are looking for events, conditions, failure points, and thresholds that show up in a number of different ways, such as our automatic discovery and dependency map for Citrix. Upon deployment, our technology is already looking for all those monitoring rules. It's deployed and shows a map of your entire Citrix delivery infrastructure and how those components all work with one another. And this is done automatically right out of the box. And those monitoring rules, as I mentioned, drive a lot of this. It drives the heat map structure here. So as issues start to take place on individual components, they'll turn from green to red or orange, depending on the level of severity. Now, say if you were to get an alert, you see one of these, a delivery controller, for example, is turned red. You can then quickly look on the right-hand side, see, what resource utilization was CPU running high, is memory paging an issue. You can see context-specific health checks, as well as any of those alerts that were firing off. Was there a Citrix broker service that was failing? There's multiple different views in the at this point of the technology. The top left, you can filter between multiple different Citrix sites, so whether you have an active passive setup. Right now, we're just looking at the infrastructure view where you can see the net scalers, the storefront servers, the delivery controllers, and any other supporting servers in the environment. You can drill down further into the delivery layer, which really breaks out the environment from a logical perspective, where you have the delivery controllers mapped out to the delivery groups, your machine catalogs and gold images if available, and then take it all the way down to the machine layer, where you have all those components, again, tightly correlated down to the hypervisor cluster and individual hypervisor hosts that all have average end user experience metrics displayed on the right-hand side so that you can come up with conclusions as far as what could be causing performance issues for a large number of users. This is typically used as a knock view, where you have this up on a large screen and can quickly be able to click through and see the overall health of the environment, but it can also be used as a very effective troubleshooting stop. With that, let me get back to the PowerPoint slide so we can continue.
And while Avi brings up the next PowerPoint slide, I do want to emphasize, you're going to see us mention different EHR applications throughout the demonstration. So you just saw an example using Cerner. We can do the same thing and do the same thing for a Epic environment, an Allscripts environment, a MEDITECH environment, and in fact, in environments that are using other applications. We really are testing the availability of those applications and are they performing the way they should as they're delivered via Citrix or VMware Horizon. So that will work across any type of EHR application that you might have. So the second way that we really want to focus on is around troubleshooting, right? And this is something that comes to us often, especially in this new world that we're living in, where so many users are now working remotely. In health IT, having such a high number of back office staff working remotely, having telehealth and more of your clinicians working at their home offices. So with troubleshooting, it really becomes, can you provide the right level of insights and correlate the metrics that are coming from end user behavior, the endpoint, the logon, the connection, the underlying infrastructure, whether it's Citrix or Horizon or an on-prem environment, as well as your EHR applications. How do you bring all of that together in a single pane of glass that correlates the data and really isolates and proves true root cause across those different elements? And the big key is it being granular enough that you can look at it at a user session level so that you can look back historically, because I'm sure many of you get calls from users that say, you know what, last week my system was slow, or 5 days ago, 3 days ago, but can also look in real time in case you're dealing with a real-time use case. And the biggest piece is then providing documented evidence. I can't tell you how many times I hear or Avi hears where a user's been able to take, because of Goliath, a conversation that may have been even days of back and forth trying to diagnose and turn it into a 5-minute conversation and showing them with empirical evidence, here is the root cause. And it might be because of a behavior that's going on or a connection that might be happening at the Wi-Fi standpoint. So let me go ahead and give you an example. We were working with a health system. They have, I think, 5 or 6 different outlets, but their main facility is a medical campus out west. And they were coming to us because their clinicians were really complaining about slow logon times. And in fact, they felt that it was over 2 minutes in most cases. Of course, that result came back that Epic was slow. There was a lot of finger pointings, right? Was it an issue with the Epic deployment? Was it an issue within their Citrix environment? And ultimately, they put Goliath in so they could truly isolate what was going on, and because of that, reduce logon time. So one of the things they found was that peak usage, when multiple users were all logging in, it was actually a bad delivery controller that was starting to run out of memory. So everything looked okay, right? But it wasn't until they realized that whenever certain users were calling in and complaining, they were calling in and complaining at the same time, and they were all hitting the same delivery controller. Another issue that occurred that they were able then to reduce is it wasn't that the network itself was bad, but not enough bandwidth was given to the Citrix environment to support all the clinical applications. So when you ask the network team, they said, yeah, everything looks fine. But what they were able to show in Goliath was that the user was not experiencing enough bandwidth to be successful and perform their job. Avi, do you want to go ahead and give an example now of how we were able to help this specific health system and others?
Sure. Yeah, let me flip to the portion of the technology that is most commonly used to help solve that issue. Where I'm flipping to right now is our Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop Session Display. And this section of the technology will populate with all of your Citrix sessions, not just your active ones, but your historical ones as well. We don't average or roll up any of your data, so you get the same level of granular detail for a session that took place a month and a half ago as you would for an active session. You decide how long that you want to keep the data. So when, say, clinician Heather decides to put in a support ticket or complain about poor performance, saying that Citrix has been slow for the past 30 days. You can just type in Heather's name at the top right, which will search for any text that's on the screen, automatically filter for her sessions. And then when you find the session that you want to investigate as far as what is causing the poor performance, you're able to just select that particular session. And what will populate here is a summary screen that has all the high-level key data points that went into this user sessions, from the client endpoint through the logon process. You have your ICA and HDX connection metrics. Then you move into the data center where you have your session host, so whether it's a VDI or a Zen app server, your hypervisor host if you want to integrate that, your applications and processes, as well as the alerts and the event logs. Now, as far as the troubleshooting scenario that we're talking about to be able to pinpoint when network is the root cause, where you'll typically do that is right from this bottom section right here, the key performance metrics. And clients will typically be able to come up with quick conclusions as to the root cause right from this screen here without having to go into any of those other tabs that we just went through. But from this key performance metrics, first place that you take a look at is round trip time, which, as I'm sure a lot of you may be aware of, is the amount of time from when a user does an action for it to traverse the network, be processed on the session host, and displayed back at the endpoint. And this is the most accurate depiction as far as was this user having performance issues, because it's as simple as if they have round trip time that is above, say, 350 milliseconds, which here is represented by this orange line, that's when latency could be apparent to the end user. And if it's above the red line, which right now is set for 450 milliseconds and is considered critical, that's when you know the user's having performance issues. So say in this scenario, this user does have some points where latency is above that 350 millisecond mark. We now want to find out, was it part of the network, or was it more of a resource utilization issue that was the root cause? And where we first take a look at is network latency. This is real-time network latency from the ICA protocol itself. This isn't an ICMP or ping-based test, but this is the amount of network latency that is impacting the user session from their perspective, from the end user. So if network latency is high, that means that is a contributing factor to the high round trip time. There's a direct correlation there. So it's not the total amount of network that's available, it's the amount that's available for this particular user's session's journey. Now, you've determined it's a network issue here. I can see that the network latency is increasing at the same time that round trip time did. Where was that latency from? And that's where this bottom metric here, connection speed, is able to give you that additional insight. Connection speed is the amount of bandwidth that is available for Citrix receiver or the workspace app wherever this clinician is working from. So whether they're logging in from their home office, whether if they're at a hospital location, whether they're working at a Starbucks, the amount of bandwidth that is available for receiver or the workspace app. And what I can see is at the time when network latency is high, connection speed dropped significantly, all the way from, say, 100 megabits per second down to about 12. And where that is important is to have this data, is because now you have objective evidence saying that there was a huge drop in the bandwidth that was available for this user's Citrix session. It pinpoints right exactly that's the root cause. And then you can have that data-driven conversation with the end user. Say nowadays where a lot of people are working remotely, they could say, oh, my ISP says I have the highest amount of bandwidth available. Can't be that. And you can say, oh yeah, I see that you had over 100 megabits per second of connection speed, but when you were having the issues, it dropped significantly all the way down to 12. Was that, what was going on at 10:48? Because you can see that it's timestamped. What was happening at that time? And the end user could, or the clinician could say, oh, that's when, say, the kids got home and started streaming Netflix. They started playing Xbox. Maybe this user just walked farther away from the router at a hospital location or from the remote office. And got farther away from the router, and they need to get closer to it. So it gives you that objective evidence as to if network is the root cause. You also then have the VM resources and the hypervisor host resources here, all correlated onto a single pane of glass. Now, we also give additional insight into the ICA and HDX channels. Where I want to focus on this part of the demonstration here is this bottom left-hand chart, the ICA channel usage. The way how Citrix is architected with the ICA channel is there's virtual channels that have different jobs to handle certain bandwidth allocation. So for example, at the top, you can see the end user experience metrics such as audio bandwidth. Was this user, if the bandwidth is spiking for audio bandwidth, this user was then probably streaming audio, or if it's inbound audio bandwidth to the server perspective, maybe this user was utilizing dragon dictation or doing, part of a Teams call where they're talking into their session. Clipboard bandwidth, was there a large copy and paste file that hung up the session? Thin wire bandwidth, which is a Citrix display adapter. Was that user doing something graphically intensive within their session? Was there, X-ray images that they were, pulling up, and then that could have impacted the performance? Or maybe was this user streaming a sporting event as well that could also hinder the performance of the Citrix session? And based off of the type of bandwidth that's being utilized within the session, you're able to then correlate potentially end user behavior as a root cause of poor performance. Now, this is how you're able to see from a user perspective, but again, with resource utilization, memory paging could be a potential issue. Disk latency at the bottom right here with storage IOPS, with storage an issue, CPU an issue. So there's a number of different areas that can impact the user performance, and we have that all tightly correlated into a single pane of glass so that you can come up with quick conclusions as to what could be causing the poor performance. Now, this information that I was just showing now is of the delivery of your EHR applications, but sometimes it could actually be the back-end performance of the Epic application or MEDITECH, and we are the only technology that has those purpose-built modules for those respective EHRs. So let me just pull up a quick example of one that we have here for Epic. Let me flip to that. And so from here, you're able to see, the total counts, the average grefs, the block reads, the DB and web requests. You have this additional dashboard as far as the latency from within the application itself. So it gives you that full pane of glass where you can combine end user experience, the entire delivery infrastructure, as well as the performance of your back-end EHR applications. So with that, I know that we also have a quick slide here as far as for MEDITECH. So let me just share that out while we're going through these different dashboards. And here you go, where you're able to see, this is just one. You can see that there's about 6 different types of dashboards that we have available, all with different charts in them that give you that insight, such as disk IOPS for the file servers, the file read and writes in progress, IO. So a lot of information that not everyone in IT will typically have access to. Oftentimes it'll be the Citrix teams that we're working with that don't have access to the Epic System Pulse data, or it could be a Citrix team where they're working also with MEDITECH that didn't have this type of information. But with us, you get a single pane of glass to have all that information in one single pane of glass. And it's not just Citrix. I know I was heavily focused on that, but we do this for VMware Horizon as well. So with that, we'll move to the next scenario. Stacy.
Great. So the third and final way to really ensure you're delivering that seamless user experience is to be able to have the opportunity to document exactly what that experience is for users. And this might be looking at logon time and trending over time. We've worked with many clinicians and health IT systems where they have committed to reducing logon time, and they now need to provide quarterly reports proving that those log times are below their SLA standards. It can also talk about productivity, and Avi's going to talk through a couple different types of the data. But really, one of the things I want to emphasize, if you're looking at our system or any system, when you're thinking about documenting the end user experience and the environment, you need to think about it in 3 ways. One, if you can get to that information, can you share it easily? Can you share it via a PDF or Excel or CSV files that you maybe then are integrating into third-party systems? Can you email it, print it? Can you integrate it into your overall workflow so that you can share information with your ticketing systems like a ServiceNow or a Sharewell, or maybe integrate it with your event management logs like a Splunk. And then finally, can you enhance it? Do you have out-of-the-box reports that can be configured to fit your environment? And can you visualize this data maybe using a Power BI or a Tableau? When we work with our clients, that's what's really critical, is not only that they have the data to document the user experience, prove when resolution has been created for their end users, but also to be able to share, integrate, and enhance that data. So if we go to our next customer example, this is actually Children's National Hospital. I don't know if any of you attended Chime this year virtually, but they actually presented this story where their challenge was they needed to not only reduce their logon time, but continually prove to management that they were below 30 seconds initial logons and 10 seconds for reconnects. And this really became almost stalled at phase 1 because they didn't have the data to prove what was really going on. So again, they are a Cerner hospital, so they deployed us across both their hosted environment and on-premise. They were able to go ahead and deliver management monthly reports across their environment. So they were able to show them what it was before they began some improvements, what it was during the rollout, and what it was completed. And this actually occurred during the pandemic. So you can imagine, not only did they need to share that, but they also needed to share logon times with those that were inside their hospitals versus those that were working remotely. They ultimately, by not only providing the reports, but also troubleshooting, they were able to reduce their logon times by 65% and really exceeded their SLA standards. And this is also the client I happened to mention reducing their VDI number of tickets. So if we go to the next slide, this is just an example of one of the reports that they were able to use for logon times. And you can see this is actually showing them logon times based on time period, location, and application. So all of the reports that come with Goliath are available out of the box and then can be configured to fit your needs. Avi, do you want to tell everyone today a little bit of some of the out of the box reports that are available with Goliath?
Sure. That one that we were just on was a great example of some of the reporting capabilities. And let's talk about some other options that you have. One of the big benefits of the technology is that we are collecting a broad and deep subset of data that, as Stacy mentioned, can all be enhanced, shared, integrated. And so when taking a look at this chart here, at the far left, you can see end user performance metrics that you're able to report on. So whether that's end user experience, logon duration, connection speed. In the center, end user activity. So peak usage times, the application usage that are most common, license usage. And at the far right, system performance, seeing the overall health of the environment, such as, how are the VMs performing, the server health, alert analysis of what alerts are being triggered across the environment, host performance. And here's, I'm going to go through a couple different examples here. The end user experience report. Any of these reports can be, run on demand, sent out on daily, weekly, monthly, be sent up to different business line managers, sent out to different, vendors, or collaborate, or have them sent out to different teams so that you can collaborate with one another. With end user experience data here, you can quickly be able to see how many users are having performance issues, whether it's, a logon duration, certain threshold that you want to report on, say maybe a ICA latency. And again, all these can be filtered based off of delivery group or a number of, subset of the environment if you want it. Right here, we have the logon duration report where you're able to see, what stage of the logon process has been impacting the users the most. Is it client validation, authentication, or group policies taking a while to execute? You're also able to see then if the session was a reconnect or if it was the initial logon, as Stacy touched on that a number of different health systems that we work with have those SLAs for reconnect and initial logon times that they need to go by. And here's the end user productivity report. This one has been heavily leveraged during this remote work and work from home initiative that COVID has put us into, where we're used to seeing employees, in the office every day. We know their level of productivity, but that's not always the case now. So this report gives insight into how productive end users are able to be. You're able to see each user, how they connected into the environment, how long that they were in their sessions for, and primarily the most important metric is their interaction time. So this interaction metric shows really how productive an end user was within their session, how much were they working, and this interaction metric is compiled of a number of different data points, including, mouse click, keyboard input, generating ICA traffic within the sessions, and accurate representation of how much that user was working within their session. And while some organizations may have HR want to use this as kind of like a big brother approach, a lot are using this more to make sure that they're able to support their users. If they're seeing that a typical high performer is having low interaction percentage within their sessions, maybe they need some help. And this report has been able to direct IT teams that use our technology to be able to be proactive and reach out saying, hey, what can we do to be able to help you? Some more reports here as far as the Citrix Logon stages, where you can be able to trend over time, see if as you guys are making changes in your environment, are they positively impacting logon times? Are they potentially hurting the logon times? Especially if it's positively impacting logon times, able to have this be sent up to management. And while again, a lot of that was based off of Citrix, same thing for VMware Horizon, where you're able to see the logon summary. So you can have these filtered, a lot of these based off of internal connections, external connections, and then be able to just make sure that you're having the right information be reported on for your business needs. And with that, let me see here. I guess this is another thing as far as that, we touched on number of different partnerships that we have. So we did mention Epic earlier, the only, IT operations software that's, has purpose-built modules for Epic. We're a member of the Epic App Orchard that where we're combining Epic System Pulse data, the end user experience and delivery infrastructure all into a single pane of glass.